Welcome to the Random Encounter Show. I'm DeathStalker V. In this episode, we're going into part 3 of our deep delve into Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. Now, if you missed part 1 where we did an overview of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls and a general history of Tunnels and Trolls due to it being the second published role-playing game in the history of human civilization, or you missed part 2 where we dug into my personal collection of everything Tunnels and Trolls and looked at some of those wonderful solo adventure modules and just talked about them and had fun. I highly recommend you go checking those episodes out as well. In part 3, this episode, we're going to be digging directly into this massive beast of a rule book. We're going to be looking at the rules and mechanics that comprise the system of Tunnels and Trolls. We're going to be taking a look also at Troll World, the built-in campaign setting for Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. And the whole time that we're doing that, I'm going to be doing my best to answer some of the most frequently asked questions I've seen asked from beginners specifically for this system. I'm also going to be giving out game advice and how best to approach this system and use this system for solo gamers as well as group gamers to really unlock the full potential of the game. Toward the end, we're going to be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of this system. I will say up front, this system for me does have a critical failure point, but I'm going to also tell you how I overcome that in this game. So a lot to cover. This episode is going to be jam-packed full. I'm going to get behind the camera, we'll get down on the table, and we'll start digging through this massive beast. Okay, before we start off and get into this rule set, let's first talk about what you would need to play Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. To me, as far as what you'll actually need, it's probably the easiest tabletop role-playing game to get into. You'll obviously need some paper and something to write with. Scrap paper comes in handy for this game, but at least one sheet of paper, or maybe you print off a character sheet such as this one that's included in the book. You'll need somewhere to keep track of your character or characters. I personally use an index card. All essential information easily fits on an index card. You'll also need standard six-sided dice. I may call these D6 as we go through the video. That's just shorthand for six-sided dice. There will be no instance in this game where you will use any other type of dice, such as a D20 or a D10 or 20-sided die or 10-sided die. It's character creation, your saving throws, combat, magic, everything utilizes your standard six-sided dice. So fairly easy to just jump right into. Now, let's talk a little bit about, before we jump in, how people approach this game, and they get a lot of misconceptions from it. A lot of people come to Tunnels and Trolls with the mindset that it's going to play like a class and level system, such as Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. And that's where a lot of problems are going to begin, because Tunnels and Trolls is absolutely not a class and level system. As we'll see as we go in, this is actually an attribute-based system. And I really love attribute-based role-playing games because they allow you a lot of freedom to create the exact kind of character that you want on the table. Okay? So let's go ahead and dive in and look at the major sections of the rules. We're not going to cover every single rule. We're not going to go into great detail because there's so much to cover. We're just going to cover the major sections and the basic mechanics of the game. Now, just jumping straight into this, you do get a nice introduction to the game and some idea of how to play the game. But where most people want to begin with a rule set is how do we create a character creation. And they start that off early in the book, which is good, but the book is a little out of order from how I approach character creation in Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. One thing you will need, though, is under this listing of prime attributes, you have all 8 of your prime attributes in this game defined and explained. That's very important for you to read if you're coming to this for the first time. This is an attribute-based game, as we said. Attributes are the most important parts of your character sheets. And some of these may be familiar to you from other games, but still read it and get an understanding. You know, if you're coming from something like Dungeons and Dragons, where you get hit points per level and such things, that's absolutely not the case with this game. In fact, your constitution score itself is what you would think of as hit points. But as you get damaged in combat or whatever in the game, you'll actually subtract down from your constitution. Other things in the game can make you lose other attribute scores. But there being 8, some of the major ones, I guess they're all major, but some of the ones that are going to be different from what you're used to. Like I said, with constitution, that's basically your hit points for taking damage. Wizardry is going to be your magic points. You could think of them as mana, or in the city of Kazan, as we'll see later on, it's your crim. Okay, there's also luck in this in Tunnels and Trolls, and I absolutely love that there's an attribute for luck, because just like in real life, sometimes things just happen, and we can say, wow, that was down to luck. So that's a nice little attribute to have in the game. But overall, just pay attention and make sure you understand these attribute scores. Now, before we go into talking about how to roll them up and assign them, I personally like to start by getting an idea of what kind of character I want to play. And the best place to start with this is we turn over here and we go to our the playable character kindreds. And these are the base rules. The front of this book contains the base rules. In the back, you'll see elaborations or optional rules that add a lot more detail to this game. But for the playable character kindreds, you have 6 kindreds to start off with. You have your humans. You have dwarves. Pay attention, there's actually 2 types of dwarves here tied to Troll World. A lot of these rules you can easily separate from Troll World, but as written, they're very much entwined with Troll World, the campaign setting included in this book. You have elves, sort of your standard fare. But then we get into a little bit more exotic things you probably haven't seen in other role-playing game systems, such as fairies and leprechauns. You also have hobs down here, and these are your halflings or your hobbits. The reason I say that this is probably one of the first things you want to decide about your character is because more so than class, your kindred determines a lot about your character, including the attributes. Before you roll those up and throw them on your character sheet, over here you have these boxes. They're actually multipliers that you use for your attribute scores before you record them. These manipulate the attribute scores for the kindred types. There's also descriptions of the kindreds. So you will find that, like fairies, they're naturally magic. Okay? So therefore, you would know that when it comes time to pick your character type, more than likely they're going to be rogues, because they're not studious magicians, but they could be wizards, they could be anything you can imagine. This is not a class and level system, but paying attention to these things, you're going to get information that helps you create your character. including some special abilities and stuff of the various kindreds. So that's where I absolutely begin. Now I want to take a further consideration and say, well, what type of character do I want to play once I know what kindred I want to play? Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls does not offer you classes such as D&D. Instead, you have character types, or what I like to think of as character archetypes. You have your warriors. Okay, these are characters that are going to be skilled in the use of weapons and martial arts, ranged and melee and such. They get bonuses for weapon use in combat. They get bonuses for armor use. Then you have wizards. Your wizards are your magic users, your magicians, your mages, whatever you want to call it, druids, shamans, etc. They can use magic. They are sort of the official magic users in troll world. They belong to guilds or schools, and that's where they learn their spell work from. We'll get into that in the magic system. I love the magic system here. But they have the innate ability to cast magic and learn magic and be proficient in magic. They can use melee weapons, but they're limited, very limited to what weapons they are able to use, and they receive no bonuses whatsoever that the warriors and such get. The third character type are your rogues here. And you have to do away with what you know of rogues from other systems. When it says rogue, it actually is talking about a rogue wizard, where we said that the official wizards, if you want to call them that, they learn from guilds and schools and such. Rogue wizards actually learn sort of illegally, or they're backstreet magicians, or whatever you want to call it. They have to get their magic from other sources than the official sources. So therefore, they're very limited into what they can actually learn and when they can learn it. But they are decent with weapons. They don't receive the restrictions that the official wizards receive. You can basically think of this as a character who's decent with a weapon and can cast magic, but is not as good as warriors or wizards doing either. They do feel sort of a utilitarian purpose though, because we'll get the talents in a little while, but they do receive more talents than the other character types. So that's the basics that you really need to know before rolling up your attributes. Now, rolling up your attributes is fairly simple. You're going to roll 3 6-sided dice. And you're going to, once you roll, you're going to write the scores down on a scratch pad of paper. I don't like directly recording them to my character sheet because I like to assign the scores when I'm finished. It's pretty easy and simple to do. One thing that makes Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, or Tunnels and Trolls, different from other systems in general is the fact that if you roll up your attribute scores and you roll triples, such as, let's say, 4, 4, and 4 on all 3 dice there, Taro takes effect. Taro is triples always roll over. So if I rolled 4, 4, 4 there, that's a total of 12. I would write down the 12, say here, and we would roll our 3 dice again. The next number we would roll would be 2, 2, 4, and 7. So we'd write down 7. So we would actually sum that up as 19. But what happens if we rolled our first roll and got the 3 4s and 12, and we rolled again and we got, say, 3 3s, for example? So the first roll was 12, and then we rolled 3 3s, which would be 9. We would not stop there. In fact, we would roll again and until we didn't get triples, such as then we got 10. You know, so that's it's a grand total of let's see. Yeah, 31. I was right. You grand total of 31 to begin with. Now, if you roll and you get Taro and they continue to roll over, there is a 4th character type in the base rules, which is known as a specialist. Okay, this is a specialist is someone that starts the game off with beyond average attribute scores somewhere. Now, it really doesn't mean much to be a specialist under the base rules. Under the elaborations or optional rules, whatever you specialize in can give you more detailed character information. So let's say we scored our 31 and we put it in strength. That would make us a specialist in strength. But that's in the optional rules. We'll get there. But it's just to know that if you roll higher than average, if you hit the Taro effect, come pay attention to the specialist section. But once you have your attributes rolled up, okay, and you've recorded them on your character sheet, the next step I would take, now in the book, the next step they want you to take here is equipping your character. But I would say hold off on that while you have your character in mind of what you want to play. Go to your weight and your height. It's easy to figure out. Follow the formulas listed here. Here's your human table, for example. But you'll get your stuff listed here. Then it goes into, you know, sort of the rest of the characters, your property, and all this kind of stuff. I would say head on over to the talent section. Let's get out of the provision section. We're almost there. Come on, DeathStalker. Okay. In the base rules, we have simple talents. I really like the talent system in Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls because this is where you're going to be able to flesh out your character as you think of them. Since there's only 3 archetypes, you have to have something to give them more definition, and talents is where it's at. Now you have your simple talents here, and it's very easy to follow along with, but basically you're going to get some bonuses for your saving throws. We'll get to those in a second. That's the base mechanic of this entire game. We'll get there in a second. But with your talents, they do provide a talent list. You can obviously use the talents on this list, but follow directions and understand that you can create a talent of anything you can imagine for your character. Because of the abstract nature of Tunnels and Trolls, it's very easy to add just about anything you can think of directly to the game without changing game mechanics or anything. So let's say you wanted to build a thief style character. You started with a template, you went with a human and you made them a warrior. You know, they're not a magic using thief. Over here you have sort of your roguery and thievery skills, or talents I should say. You would choose those that would help define your character. Are they stealthy? Do they like to pick pockets? Are they burglars? Are they assassins? Or whatever you want to do. This is how you layer up your character into defining what you had in mind. Like I said, though, it's very easy just to add whatever. This is just a suggested list to give you an idea of what you can do. Okay? When you're coming to an abstract system like this, if you're coming from games where everything's set in stone, you know, that's basically telling you what to play and how to play, it can be a little difficult for your mind to just say, wow, I can really do anything I want in a more abstract system. I see a lot of people get stuck on things with Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls because they're looking for rules that they're in places where there's no rules really needed. That it's abstract and they gave you enough to do whatever you want. And talents is one of those things. Now, once you figure out your talents, now pay attention to your character types and your kindreds because you may receive more talents than normal. And you may receive more talents as you level up your character or progress your character. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about, was that in Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, because it's not a class and level system, there are no true levels for characters in Tunnels and Trolls. What you'll have is adventure points. You will earn adventure points from things like combat and making saving throws and such. We'll talk more about that in their specific sections on this episode. But character level, you don't have levels where you get this much experience points, you level up and such. Instead, you get adventure points. When you get enough adventure points, you can convert those adventure points over into increasing your attribute scores. Okay? Now, increasing your attribute scores will help a game master determine what level your character is. For you as a player, you probably will never care what level your character really is. But determining the level is a bit different. When you want to determine your character level, you're going to look at your single highest attribute score, whether it's strength, intelligence, dexterity, etc. Okay? To determine your character level, you're going to divide whatever that number is by 10 and round down. Yeah? So if you have a character that has an attribute score between 3 and, let's say, 9, they're technically a level 0 character. You won't get the first level until you have at least a single attribute above 10. 10 or above, I should say. But it's very, very easy to figure. So normally, what I do, instead of trying to divide and do all this stuff, I will look at the character's highest attribute, and if it's double digit, whatever number it begins with is its level currently. And an interesting thing, like the 31 we said we rolled up to give an example of Taro when the 3 dice add up and roll over. You can actually start Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls with a character higher than level 1. Technically, the character, if we would have added our 31 to our sheet, it would have been a level 3. When I said look at the first digit in the 2-digit number, if you had an 11, look at the 1. That is a level 1 character. If it's 23, look at the 2. It's a level 2 character. So our character would have been level 3, and I find that interesting. And it can create a party of characters that are quite different from one another, at least in level terms. Now, here's a big word of advice for playing Tunnels and Trolls. When you build your characters and you assign those attributes and you start to progress in the game, it can be quite easy to level up your character by putting all of your adventure points into one single attribute. But you're creating a very lopsided character that's only going to be good at whatever that attribute covers. I highly recommend you slowly go and raise the attribute scores of your character that are important to it, but make sure that it's well rounded. Luck is actually very important when we get into saving throws here in a minute. But it's whatever really defines that character. If it's a warrior, make sure it's got good constitution, it's got good dexterity, it's got good strength, it's got good luck. If you're playing a wizard type character, make sure it's got good constitution. All characters should have pretty high constitution if you want them to live. Again, that's your hit points. But make sure it's got good intelligence, dexterity, and wizardry, and so forth. Don't make your characters lopsided, or you're going to quickly not have a character as you progress through the game. So we've covered character level. Let's cover some of the base mechanics of the game. Now, we didn't cover character creation in full detail. Read the sections and everything, but what we did cover will give you a basis of what you need to know to create the character. Let's get over to saving throws real quick, and then we'll get into equipment and such for your character. But since we're talking about leveling our character, let's get into saving throws, because you actually get adventure points from saving throws. Here are our saving throws, and the reason I'm covering this and I'm moving back and forth is because stuff sort of spread out in the book, but I'm trying to cover it in a way that makes it comprehensive for you, that you know the major sections of what to look at. But saving throws, if you're used to saving throws, especially in your old school D&D games, throw that concept away. They can be used as saving throws, but you're mainly going to be used what they're calling saving throws here as attribute checks. Okay? Anytime you do something in the game outside of combat and it calls for making a throw or resolution to see if your character is successful or not, you're going to be making what they call a saving throw. Now, saving throws can also be something like your character stumbles on a trap or something. And so you can roll on luck or dexterity to see if your character realizes it and escapes in time. So it does have that saving sort of definition to it, but truly it's an attribute check. To do attribute checks is quite easy. In the rules it's written, it can sound sort of confusing at first. Basically what you're going to do is when you make an attribute check or a saving throw, you're going to determine what level of saving throw it is based on the difficulty. There's a chart here that's quite easy to use. Then you're going to pick the most applicable attribute toward that saving throw. Let's say I wanted to swing from a chandelier to go across a room. My character did. I would pick dexterity for that. Now what you're going to do is look at the saving throw. Let's take a level 1. We're just gonna say whatever we're doing is a level 1 saving throw. If we're gonna do the chandelier and it's level 1, our target number for level 1 is a 20. Let's say we have a 16 in dexterity. What we're gonna do is take the 20 and from it we're gonna subtract the 16. That would leave us with a 4. 4 is the lowest number you can have on this. Okay. But that would give us a target number of 4. What we're going to do at this point are we're going to roll 2d6 dice and we're going to try to reach the target number or exceed it. Now when you're doing your saving throws, just like character creation, there is DARO, or doubles, add, and roll over. Very easy to remember. So if we're making a saving throw and re-roll 2 6s, for example, that would be 12. We'd write the 12 down, we'd roll again, and keep adding until we didn't have doubles, and the sum total would be our roll. This is the base mechanics for the game, like I've said. It's very, very easy to use, and it makes it sort of the universal mechanic. Yeah? With that, you do get adventure points, whether you succeed or fail your adventure rolls. Saving rolls. I do like that because even like in real life, even if we attempt to do something, even if we fail to do it, we still learn from that, or we should have. Okay? Some people don't, unfortunately, but you should learn something even from your failures. Maybe you learn more from your failures. I know I do. But anyways, I love the fact that you get adventure points for your saving rolls. Now from here, let's move over into talking about equipping characters. Tunnels and Trolls, we keep saying it's an abstract system. When it comes to your weaponry, instead of having detailed list of lots and lots of weapons from all over classical fantasy, instead they offer you a templated system where you can drop any imaginable classical sort of fantasy weapon, whether it's a sword or a polearm or a warhammer or a elven longbow, whatever it may be. You have templates where you can easily use these to drop in whatever you imagine, and it has your stats you need for using that weapons. Specifically, it gives you swords. It gives you hafted weapons, daggers, double daggers, shafted weapons, hand-to-hand weapons, projectile weapons, pole arms, slings, unusual weapons, guns. It covers the whole gamut. And what you'll get is a few important things you need to know. First off, the dex and strength required for using the weapon. You'll also get the how many dice it uses for combat. You can also get range and the weight and the range and such for the weapon as well. But it's very, very easy to use to just drop things directly into the game. Again, we talked about that with talents. Learning that you don't have to follow some strictly defined list of things within a game. It may be sort of hard to overcome for people, but truly let this game be free and open as it's presented, and you will really enjoy it, especially game masters. There's no easier game to game master than Tunnels and Trolls. Solo players should pay attention there because that means that as far as sandboxing and stuff goes, it's very, very easy to drop stuff in right off the fly without having to worry about how they're going to fit in mechanically. Let's get outside of weapons. Armor and shields work exactly the same way. They have sets of armor with templates, and they also have templates for individual pieces of armor based on where they are placed on the body. One nice thing that's included in the rear of this book is this right here. It's a weapons glossary. For those that are unfamiliar or want to know more about weapons that typically appear in medieval classic fantasy games, this glossary is really nice. It gives you an idea of what these weapons are, and many of them have illustrations as well. All these things are very easy to drop straight in based on the templates. But I love the addition of this for those who want to know more about weaponry in your classic fantasy games. We won't get into the destruction and improvement and quality of weapons. It's all self-explanatory. Same with poisons. I love the fact that they actually included several different poisons and their effects here. Provisions are fairly easy to use. To make it even easier, when it comes to the economy of Troll World, at least as presented in Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, a silver piece equals a $1 US. Okay, so for those in the US, if you wanted to drop something that's not included in these lists of provisions in the game or for your weapons and such, if you can get an idea of how much it would be worth in standard United States currency, you can just drop it straight into the game. You know, if you're looking for something that you don't know, maybe like here, I noticed they didn't include saws of any kind. Yeah, so if you wanted to add a wood saw or a hacksaw or something to your game, you could just look it up on Amazon and see what the average price of one is, and that's how much in silver it would cost in your game. Can't beat that. So once your character is equipped and ready to go, we've talked about the save and throws, we've talked about leveling. The next major part we need to cover will be combat. Okay, diving off into combat. Combat's very simple with Tunnels and Trolls. Like we said, using the base combat, you will not need miniatures, you will not need battle maps or any of that kind of stuff. It's literally group versus group dice pool combat is the best explanation I can give you. Let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. We're just going to broadly talk about combat and not get into many specifics that are detailed in the book. And I do like that combat is well written in the book. They cover a lot of ground with the combat section for different things you can do and use in combat. So we don't need to get into the very specifics. We'll just talk about it in a broad sense. For combat, you will have your player character or characters as a group, and they will face their hostile opposition in combat, whether it be a single combatant or a group of combatants. Both groups basically square off and throw dice at each other, and the loser takes damage. Now, how is this all figured in? Well, first thing you want to know is you can see it here on the character sheet, and you should have it notated down on whatever character sheet you're using and keep it updated, is your personal combat adds. This comes from strength, luck, dexterity, and speed. What that means is that each one of these attributes that have a score over 12 in them, for each point over or each number over 12, you get a combat add for that. So let's say, which is strength, for example. We had a strength of 14. That's 2 over 12, so that would give us a combat add. If we had 13 in luck, that's 1 over 12. It would give us 1 for that. Then we would combine all 4 of the attributes that are used in combat to get our overall combat add score for each character. Okay, same with the hostile opposition. We'll talk about that coming up. But you do that for your entire group that's involved in combat. You get all their adds together, and you also check and see how many D6 combat dice they're going to use. Some get it from their character type, such as the warrior gets an extra dice for every so many levels. I think it's every level. I can't remember exactly for the warrior. But weapons also add in combat dice as well. When it comes to combat dice, it's still the six-sided standard die. But I recommend you having 2 different colors and a good many of the dice themselves. Because in larger combats and at higher level, a lot of dice are thrown. We'll get into that later on. It figures into something we have to talk about with this game. But basically, after you know how many combat adds you have and how many dice for both sides, you roll 2 dice pools, 1 for each side. You will add the combat adds. You will add the dice totals. Whichever side had the highest, they win the combat. And the difference between the higher side and the lower side is the damage done. Okay, now that's where armor comes in to mitigate that damage at that point. Another thing is that the losing side, if in their dice pool they rolled 6s, for example here, this was the dice pool. They can get much larger than this, but if any of their dice came up on, or dice came up on 6s, each 6 equals a point of spike damage that's done to the winning side. Armor does not mitigate spike damage. Okay, that's just to show that even if you win a round of combat, it doesn't mean that you got through unscathed. Yeah? And that's really how easy it is to do combat. Now, throughout this combat section, there'll be a lot of things that are more detailed and different situations and such. And they do a great job of just illustrating over and over and over of how easy it is to run combat. Missile combat. Let's talk about that, for example. Somebody in the group is using bow and arrow, for example, or a crossbow or something. Before you do your party roll for the melee combat and damage and such, what you're going to do with missile combat is the character who's going to be using the bow and arrow or the ranged weapon will actually make a dex saving throw. Okay? They will also do it on a level saving throw based on this chart here. What the chart breaks down is range, or how far away the enemy is compared to what size the enemy is. So obviously the smaller and further away the enemy is, the higher level saving throw is going to be required to hit. Okay? Now once you hit, then you add your dice to the dice pool for the overall combat, the main mechanism of combat. So it's fairly easy to use and remember. And magic works in the same manner. So you also have things like martial artists, and it talks about berserk combat, using 2 weapons, combat with and without magic. It's very easy. It's self-explanatory. I don't think there's a lot of questions revolving around combat that I've seen people ask. The one question I have seen asked is, once you finish a round of combat and the player characters take damage, okay, since everybody's throwing against the whole other side, how do you figure out which of the characters took damage? Say you had a group of 3 characters and you had one character, the number 3 back here, shooting a bow, and these 2 doing melee, for example. Now, how would we figure out if our side lost and they took, let's say 9 points of damage? How do we figure out which one of these characters took that 9 points of damage? Most of the time, it's pretty reasonable just to distribute those points of damage. 3, 3, and 3. That would be the 9 points of damage. But if you wanted to get a little more elaborate, you could say that the ranged the one who shot the missile, isn't involved in the melee up front, so the two melee characters in the midst of battle should probably take the bulk of damage. But common sense spreading that damage out. But that's just for illustrative purposes. Under most circumstances, it's best just to distribute damage throughout the party as evenly as possible. When it comes to magic, okay, this is one of the best parts about Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. They went all out for the magic system here. It starts off talking about magic, and it starts talking about the world of magic, especially in Troll World. Magic's not known by any single name, by any single culture in Troll World, but in the area around Kazan, it's known as Krim. It may also be called mana, or power, or energy, or whatever in other parts of Troll World. But magic is broke down into the 5 C's. We're going to show you basically schools. I thought that was interesting because that actually came from the older city books of Flying Buffalo Incorporated's publishing history. They incorporated it here. When you're looking at magic, magic users need 2 things to cast a spell, basically. They have an IQ requirement and they have a Dex requirement for whatever level spell they're going to cast, because magic is not just spoken word and not just gesture, but gesture and spoken word together. We talked about wizards versus rogues, that one is sort of the official magic user, as in they're part of the guilds or the schools and they learn magic officially. And we talked about rogues, they learn rogue magic or back alley magic or whatever you want to call it, that they sort of learn it off the black market illegally. It talks about the guilds and such here, and it also talks about learning magic. There's many different ways for characters to learn magic. There's schools of magic. There's your 5 C's. Each school has different spell types that they use. Learning magic can also come from books. They can be learned on the fly. They could also be taught using a teacher spell and such. One thing to note, that this is not Vancian magic system like old school dungeons and anything based off Jack Vance's system of magic where the character would forget it after they casted it. No, Tunnels and Trolls uses the wizardry attribute to determine how many points you have of casting or power. So once you deplete that, you have to replenish that before you can cast again once it's down to 0. Magic is scalable with Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, that you can power up spells from, if you have a level 1 spell, you can actually cast it as a level 3 spell if you have the wizardry and requirements to do so. So magic's fantastic. You have to read the section and get used to it. I absolutely love, though, when rule systems actually include like the theories of magic, of why it exists in the world and how it's used and such. So just a fantastic job. The spell lists are broken down. Here's your spell book. They're broken down by levels all the way up until the 18th level here. So lots and lots and lots of spells to use. But they're also, if we get over here, they are broken down by category and broken down by schools, and with page numbers on it for easy lookup. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can use magic in here and categorize it. And I love that they've done it several different ways. With magic, it's important to note that wizards have different things that they can use, where warriors have weapons and all these kind of things. Wizards can get staves and wands. They can get magic batteries, basically. Potions and wards and magical trinkets. One thing to keep in mind is that magic users can actually enchant items with different spells and things. That way you get magical items in your game. If you're a game master, all you have to do is enchant an item with whatever spell to make it magical. A lot of people ask, where's the magic treasure? Where's this? Where's that? It's up to you to make that stuff. They give you everything you need to make it. You just have to use your imagination and come up with it. But I love the fact that our magic users in this game have the ability to enchant and do more other than combat or utility style magic while like in combat. So power batteries, these you can store wizardry in or crim in and tap into it while you're casting. So when your wizardry's getting close to depleted, you can tap into one of your batteries. I don't know. It's fantastic. It even goes into allowing players to invent their own spells. So yeah, it's fantastic. Now we get to the section of how to put it all together, and I think they do a fair job at talking about putting all of these rule mechanics and such together and how to play it as a game. Now, we have 165 pages of base rules, and these will probably be all that you ever need for playing Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. Certainly more than you will probably ever need if you're playing the solo adventure modules. Okay, but yeah, you definitely got a nice comprehensive rule set with universal mechanics. The elaboration section is for adding more detail to your game and optional rules. Really and truly, every rule in this game is easily optional. Okay, if you didn't like magic, you could totally change it without busting up the mechanics. If you wanted to spice up combat, you could easily do so without messing up the mechanics. And it talks about that in the elaboration section a little bit. But more importantly, it gives you an idea that if you want to change things, where you can take it and how to go about it. Okay? But for the optional rules and for the more details, such as here, we get into character types. We talk about pre-adventure training with warriors and wizards and rogues. We get into specific racial or kindred magic that they share. We get into what I was talking about, the specialists. In the base rules, the specialist really doesn't feel that special. But getting in here with these elaborations and these optional rules, you can really make the specialist something special. They also added in citizens for like an average resident of Troll World, how to play like a citizen character that's not a wizard or a warrior or a rogue. They also added in paragons. If you're lucky enough to roll one of these up, you most definitely should try it out. Next up, one thing I just realized that we sort of missed, and that's okay because I wanted to get to this section anyway, is what about monsters in the game? Where is the monster manual? This is the big thing I've seen on social media with Tunnels and Trolls is, how did you send us a rule book and there's no monsters, there's no monster manual, there's no NPCs and all this kind of stuff. And really, there shouldn't be one. We're going to roll back here before the combat section just for a second. And we're going to talk about one of the most genius parts of Tunnels and Trolls to me. And one of the things that makes this game unbelievably easy to game master. The hostile opposition section of the book, 7.0. Monster ratings. Anything you can possibly imagine or bring from any other source, you can pretty much drop straight into the game by assigning it a common sense number. Okay, that number is called a monster rating. If you look at characters and you want to scale what you're doing to your characters, for every level of characters on the table, you'll probably want to have a level of monster. When you do your monster rating, you can think that every character level is equal to 25 in the monster rating. So a level 50, or my bad, A monster rating of 50 would equal 2 character levels. Okay? But what is this monster rating? Once you apply it, the monster rating is one number that acts as all the stats of the monster or even group of monsters that the player characters are facing in combat. So we get a chart here that gives you the number of combat dice the monster ratings give out. If you want to know how many dice to do officially, you divide the monster rating by 10 and add 1 die. Okay, so, here's the chart. 1 to 9, you divide that by 10, you get 0. But 1 die. 10 to 19, 2 die, and so forth. That makes it easy to do. What about their combat adds? Half of the monster rating is your combat adds. What about their constitutional score, or how much damage can they take? That is your monster rating. So you get all that from one number that you're ready to go, just throw it straight into battle. And I don't think there's any system out there that makes it easier than that. And it's one of the reasons that this game, you can easily run any adventure module from any other game or any other source directly with this game pretty much on the fly. When it comes to statted monsters though, or statted NPCs and such, you already have your kindreds that you can use. You can roll up for your kindreds. In Tunnels and Trolls though, the Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, Section 13, you come to what they call other playable kindreds. Truly what they're giving you is basically a Troll World specific, they call them Ilkins, but monster manual. Okay, and it gives you descriptions and illustrations of the Ilkins themselves. Now, Ilkins are, in Tunnels and Trolls, they're not to be thought of, at least in Troll World, as like evil monsters. Okay, even though we might call them monsters from the human perspective. Here's your charts here that show you how you can roll up all of these Ilkins. You will also see that they're classified to familiar Ilkin, scarier Ilkin, and terrifying Ilkin. And then the good kindreds, familiar Ilkin, less common Ilkin, and extraordinary Ilkin. Troll World is vastly different than anything you're used to if you're not used to Troll World. We're going to put that out there. You really need to read the descriptions of these Ilkins to understand them. Like a goblin. Do you know what a goblin is? In Troll World, it's not some kind of creature that lives under the ground as in eternal strife with the dwarven cities and such. No, it's a semi-amphibious creature that lives in marshes and lives near rivers, and their main occupation seems to be fishing, and they actually trade with other kindreds around Troll World. You'll even see them working jobs and such, and we'll get to that when we get to Troll World of just how different things are. But for right now, you really need to read the descriptions and such. Just like the good kindred we saw in the base rules, some of these also have abilities and things that you're going to need to know, because you can actually use them for player characters. There are a ton of them. So now you went from 6 base kindred or races to now you have dozens at your fingertips to use for Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. I think it's brilliant. Again, it's another way to easily have some statted NPCs and monsters as well. But for the most part in my gaming, and I mostly do sandbox style gaming with this game nowadays, I find it easier just to use monster ratings, but your mileage may vary. But that's just how easy it is to use this game. We get into languages that surround Troll World. Extended talents are pretty nice. I like the fact that talents help define your character. I like the extended talents because it puts more depth in using the talents, and it also allows you to level up the specific talents themselves. So that's something to pay attention to. You don't have to have talents at all in your game if you don't want it, but I really like it. I think it adds some detail and gives characters more of a personality in mechanic-wise, because things with Tunnels and Trolls, without the extra bits, they all seem very samey. You're going to get information on characters and stuff that with the older editions of Tunnels and Trolls and how to make them deluxe. We got accessories where they talk about all kind of ways of handling combat. If you wanted to try to use miniatures and add movement in and all this kind of stuff. The kitchen sink is nice. It's a few random generation charts. Solo players love these. Sadly, there's just too few here. You know, there's just too few. But we get a gym generator, and we get some random encounter generations. We get time in Troll World, how to mark time, the months and such. And just all the little bits and extras that fill in the game. Now we get to one of the most exciting parts of this book for me, because, like I said, I've never had a single one-resource book for role-playing games that had so much in it. And the fact that it's got a full campaign guide to Troll World is astounding to me. I absolutely love it. Let's talk about Troll World here just for a second. Troll World, I guess, it's the campaign setting for the second oldest role-playing game known to man. So therefore, it's got a long history in our world of being developed and contributed to. Troll World has been contributed to by many, many people over decades. And I think Ken St. Andre and Liz Danforth did a fantastic job of pulling it all together here and making it sort of a cohesive, unified history, because Troll World, the sections of Troll World that were created by different people, they can be quite diversely different from each other. One thing about Troll World is you're going to see a lot of classical fantasy tropes in Troll World, but it would behoove you to really read and understand Troll World itself, because like we said with goblins, and like we said with other parts of this game, that yes, it uses classic fantasy tropes, but it puts its own spin on it. Okay? When I think of Troll World, even though there's goblins and dwarves and trolls and dragons and such, I think of it more like a Star Wars setting. Okay? Like Tatooine. In the first film, when Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi go to the Katina, and you see all of these different aliens of different races and such all mixing together and cohabitating. It doesn't mean that they like each other, but they cohabitate with each other. The same thing sort of going on in Troll World. Troll World has a long history that's been laid out here. And this history is what gives it as much logic and unification as possible with a place like Troll World. So you have epic wizard duels that happened over millennia. You have people coming in dimensional gates and such. Wizards bringing in various races and such to work for them or to battle for them. It's fascinating, really. And it's all an attempt to unify what at first might seem really gonzo or really just out of place, you know. But in the end, I think it does a good job. But knowing that Tunnels and Trolls isn't your classical fantasy setting is key, because when you read about cities and there's goblins helping human children, you know, across the street, for example, or there's dwarves and ogres working together and such things, it just breaks the classic fantasy setting. And it may be a little bit jarring at first. It was for me until I really sat down and just got settled down with Troll World. The great thing about this book is each major continent has a map and is keyed to locations. Also, NPCs and histories and such are talked about in each. So there's a lot of fantastic information here to get ready to play in Troll World. There's years and years and years of just using this campaign material in game time if you wanted to use it. It works pretty well for solo sandbox, and it works fantastic for Game Master games with players as well. And like I said, each and every continent or section of Troll World sort of has its own different flavor. So like Sonan-e here has sort of a Japanese style flavor. Or a classical Japanese style flavor, I should say. Here is one of my favorite places, Kazan by Ken St. Andre. It's a big, huge city, and you got it mapped out here. Several of the solo adventure modules take place in Kazan, and it's easily one of the better places to start your role-playing career in, and probably even stay in. We got a color section here of the artwork and such. Here's some big NPCs or personalities in Troll World. Here's a map of the world in total. And here are some colored maps of each continent. This map here is very important to me. This is the Dragon Continent. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. I guess I'll try. But yeah. Anyways, this map in particularly, if you look here, it is keyed to all of the, well, not all, but many solo adventure modules written for Tunnels and Trolls, and they're keyed on the map for locations. And this brings up something interesting, or it did for me. I can use this map for my solo sandbox style gaming and move around and use my generated random encounter charts and events and different things and enjoy moving around. I can use the city descriptions and such that are listed in this book for information, but I can also visit the areas where there are solo adventures located. In fact, if I want to, I can take my character or characters from the sandbox style straight into the solo adventure, choose your own adventure style modules, and then back out again. Another way I go about it is taking the solo adventure modules and not playing them as they're written, but pulling forth different details to add to my sandbox style in that area for the tables and such. There might be locations, NPCs, rumors, and different things from those solo modules I use for my sandbox style. So this is one of the main maps that I use in my solo game. But we have maps of Kazan and different places. And I absolutely just love the way they did this campaign guide. Like I said, years of material here that if you wanted to jump in, you take some of the bare bones stuff that's written and start coming up with stories of your own. Just use them as starting points. Another thing you can do with that long history, that linear history of Troll World at the front of the campaign guide, is you can use that to actually enter the world and roleplay at specific ages that have events going on that interest you. Yeah? So Troll World is definitely a place that you can get your game on in. Another favorite place of mine, the City of Gold. Okay, probably my favorite solo adventure module happens in Gold. Now when we get to the adventure section, we actually get provided with a short solo adventure called Abyss. And I like the solo adventure. The solo adventure is fun, and I'm glad to have it as part of my Tunnels and Trolls collection. But I do have a complaint here, and I don't understand this one so much. That if somebody's just buying Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls rulebook, Abyss, this adventure is probably going to be the first one they come across and the first one they want to try after creating their characters. But for some reason, they chose a solo adventure that is for dead characters. Okay, I just don't get that. A good short solo for beginning players that sort of taught how to play or something, I definitely could see that. I'm sort of lost on why they chose this one for dead characters. Again, the solo is great. Okay, I absolutely love the solo, and I find it fun that if you have a character that dies, maybe you can get them back. You know, maybe they can escape from the underworld or the afterlife. But the choice of one for dead characters is a little bit odd for me. But moving past this solo adventure, we get into Zor, a Game Master adventure on the Eagle Continent. This is one of the best Game Master adventures ever written for Tunnels and Trolls. There's quite a few good ones, though there's not a huge total compared to the solo adventures. Game Master adventures, there's not as many, but there's been some great ones. But Into Zor is fantastic. It's a 3-part full adventure, and this is exactly perfect for this book, okay? It's also got a little bit of a sandboxy style, so you can break it apart pretty easily and use it for solo gaming as well if you choose to do so. We get maps and such, and it's fully detailed, and it's got a great backstory and some great events in it and everything, but I absolutely love this one. The solo adventure, like I said, I like it, but it just seems out of place in this rule book, but we'll take what we can get, right? So, and that's pretty much wrapping it up. Hopefully I've been able to hit pretty much the major rule systems and explain them satisfactorily. I know I'm terrible when I've got to cover such a huge rule book and do it in less than, 5 or 6 hours. But we've done our best. If you have any further questions, hit me up in the comments and I'll be glad to answer them. Now we're going to turn the camera around and I'm going to get back in front of the game case, and we're going to talk more about the strengths and weaknesses of this game and really about unlocking this game. We're also going to talk about, since this game is currently out of print, where you should go. Now, coming to the end of the video, I really want to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. And in talking about that, I think we can talk about ways to really unlock the potential for this system at the table. One of the strengths we've already talked about is that this is a very abstract system, and it's very focused on high storytelling from the game master and players, along with good role playing. Okay, these mechanics for the most part take the back seat to the storytelling and role playing, so it makes it just one of the best systems that if you want to get into some fantasy role playing, grab this. It's one of the best systems for it. But that does come with some problems as well. One of the problems being that not just a problem of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, but for all abstract systems, is the more abstract the game is, the deeper the gaps are that have to be filled by the players and the game masters with the storytelling and role playing. If you come to this game and you're looking for it for solo play in a sandbox style nature, this is going to need more than usual tools. Okay? The more abstract the game is, the more tools you're going to need outside of the game system to generate enough detail to keep this game moving forward. One of the things that people come to this game and they're not ready for it, okay, is that the mechanics do not push this game forward like other game systems may that are more detailed. At its bare bone mechanics, this game isn't very exciting, if I'm honest. It takes a little bit of creativity from both sides of the table to get this game interesting. If you just played it for its bare bone mechanics, it's not going to stay interesting very long. Again, you can overcome that by having fast, fun, exciting story going on. Another thing to add in is combat. Now, they give you lots of different ways to spruce up your combat, but you really need to be putting your thinking hat on when it comes to combat, because combat's going to get boring quick if you don't. Because essentially, it's just pools of hit points throwing dice against other pools of hit points until one side loses. Okay? Again, problem solving, creativity help there. It's what we call player skill. Coming up with different ways to defeat your enemies outside of combat, in lieu of combat, or coming up with all kind of stuff to use while in combat against your enemies can make or break your enjoyment of the combat in this game. Like I said at the front of the video though, this game actually has a critical failure point for me as a role-playing game system, and it's the mechanics. And mechanically, there's really nothing you can do about this. But as you level up your characters, more and more dice go into the game. Okay? To the point where you enter combat and the game gets so bogged down. It's almost unbelievable. Where I said its strengths were storytelling and role-playing, inside combat at high levels, there's so many ads and so many dice being thrown, and it takes so long that you've got to sit there and add these up. We're talking 20, 30 die per side. And that's not actually that bad, but it can get way worse. There's really no cap. And the problem is that the mechanics of this game do not scale with the level progression of characters like other games do. It's just add more dice is the remedy for leveling and for higher level play. I'm not the only person who's found issues with that. Ken St. Andre himself, in the putting it all together section for game masters and such, says that he caps his game at level 7. You know, that things sort of come undone after at higher levels. So the designer himself, you know, makes note of that. And there was a few alternative ways of reading dice that were offered. Ken St. Andre, his preferred method is if it calls for rolling 50 dice, roll 50 dice and count them. And I like that style. Other people, contributors to the book, they were talking about doing averaging, you know, dice rolls and such. And I do not like that. I do not like that at all. And because of one consideration that I didn't see in the alternative dice reading methods, this book didn't really talk about. You know, another alternative method before I go on was using random number generators and dice rolling apps. Okay, those are fine, but there's still a big problem here. You have to count spike damage. Okay, by averaging dice, by using random number generators and such, there's no way for you to count how many 6s would have been rolled. Yeah, spike damage is important. It's an integral part of combat. It's one of the features that I think actually balances the combat. Because as combat goes on, especially higher level combat, it can tend to get one-sided after just 1 or 2 rounds. Especially if the monster rating or the characters are getting weak. I actually like this part about combat for Tunnels and Trolls. That as you lose statistics, you get weaker and weaker. Such as if you were bleeding or exhausted. So even with the monster rating, it diminishes over time, so the monster loses its ads and things. Deluxe suggests you don't let them lose their dice if you don't want to. In older editions, they would lose their number of dice and ads. But either way, I actually like that. But without spike damage there to sort of balance out, you know, the winning side and the losing side, that both sides should take some form of damage, it can get one-sided super quick. And it tends to do so anyway, even with spike damage. So, like I said, it's a critical failure for me because if the storytelling and the role-playing aren't in front of the mechanics with this game at its bare bones essential is going to be a pretty dry affair. Okay? So how do I mitigate that? I actually incorporate a level cap. I took Ken St. Andre's advice and I level cap at level 7. Now that doesn't mean your game has to stop. No, because the game is so easily scalable that your characters can continue adventuring, can continue their story and exploration and everything, and you just keep things scaled to your characters capped at level 7. The story goes on regardless, and like I said, it brings one of the strengths of the game back to the forefront. that you don't need a lot of preparation. I know of no game easier to be a game master for. I know no game where if I'm playing sandbox solo style that I can just easily just drop whatever I can imagine straight into the game without having to look up statistics and this and that and make it work mechanically. Overall, Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls fills my core spot in my library for abstract gaming, along with its sister games. We talked about that in choosing core RPG systems for your library in a video I did last year, but it continues to retain that spot along with its sister games. But this book is currently out of print, and eBay sellers and such are asking astronomical prices for it. And would I pay $200 or $300 for a copy of this book? No. Not the standard hardcover book. I would not pay that for this book. I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked just before this video, but last time I did, the PDFs of everything Flying Buffalo Incorporated had and uploaded and everything are still available through drive-thru. The problem we're facing at this point is sort of a good problem. In the first episode we did last year, at the end of last year, we talked about WebSphere, our curated corner. They go by two different names. They had purchased Tunnels and Trolls and Flying Buffalo Incorporated. Just a few weeks ago, we got news that Rebellion Studios in the UK, who have a history of publishing video and tabletop games, have acquired the rights to Tunnels and Trolls, and I've heard whispers through the grapevine that they are planning a new edition of Tunnels and Trolls. Will it take the place of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls? I don't know. I don't know anything about it other than I look forward to see what they're doing. Okay? But in the meantime, if you're looking for a game, abstract game, that has the same rule set as Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, all you have to do is look towards its sister games. Ken St. Andre, the creator of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, has made Monsters 2nd Edition the successor of Tunnels and Trolls. Now, this is it's a fantastic rule set. Shares pretty much everything with Tunnels and Trolls. It's got a little bit of a different focus in it, that you're supposed to play what you would normally consider the opposition. Okay, but you've got enough rules to roll whatever you want to roll with Monsters. This is a fantastic little rule book to pick up. It's actually set, for the most part, in Troll World. To further separate things out and to bring Monsters, what I consider to almost on par with Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. If you followed along with our show, you already know about the Monsterary of Zimrala. The Monsterary of Zimrala really reminds me of Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls in several different ways. Mainly because it's not just the bestiary of monsters. It contains a whole new Pangean-style massive continent and world. Similar to Troll World in some aspects, because we've had some visitors from Troll World actually visit Zimrala. But there's all these portals available, and there's all these different new creatures and City of the Gods tie-ins and stuff. So a lot of the things that made Tunnels and Trolls great from their contributors over the years, those same contributors have brought new and better stuff to the Monsterary of Zimrala. And it's not just a campaign setting and a bestiary like I said. It actually contains its own Monsters rule set. I'm going to flip over here. This is a good thick book. It also includes adventures and such. There's a lot going on. But here you go. Here's the starting of the Zimrala Monsters rule set. And it's written specifically for Zimrala and the campaign setting of Zimrala. This is where I recommend you go if you're watching these videos and you don't have Tunnels and Trolls just yet, or you're interested in more abstract gaming. This is highly, highly interesting and a lot of fun to get into. Anyways, this has been one long random encounter show. My throat's getting dry a little bit, so I need to get some water in me. And I appreciate you hanging out with me this long here at the Fortress of Doom. Is this the end of Tunnels and Trolls content? Not by far. Okay, we just did sort of a broad overview of Tunnels and Trolls. If you're interested in Tunnels and Trolls, or you love Tunnels and Trolls, or the monster area of Zimrala, or Monsters, or any of this other stuff I've got going on around here, make sure you're subscribed because you haven't seen the end just yet. Okay, you're going to see some gameplay footage coming up, hopefully, when I do some sandbox solo gaming. You'll see more specific coverage on various adventure modules and things. So, yeah, definitely not the end. I'm a huge fan, and this stuff will be sticking around here. Anyways, for the last time, I'm DeathStalker V. This has been the Random Encounters Show. Those dice out there aren't going to roll themselves, so get going. Hey, this is DeathStalker V. I wanted to thank you for watching the Random Encounters Show. If you love tabletop gaming, solo RPGing, or classic video games, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. If you want more of the show, head over to our channel's About page. There you will find our Facebook and Facebook group pages, where you can join in on the fun. Want to help support the show? Make sure to use our affiliate and sponsor links next time you're shopping for your favorite gaming products. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time when we roll for Random Encounter.